In chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. John, the woman of Samaria asks Jesus, where is the best place to worship? The question might be expanded to, what is the best church? What is the best religion? Is it important to go on those?
Good morning again. It's just such a joy to be with you as always, and I thank you for joining us this morning. Every year at this time, our reading asks the same question: what is the best way to worship? Is there only one that is better than all others? People are different. Cultures are different. I think that I should be able to decide what the best way is for me, and that you should have that same option for yourself. That's reasonable, isn't it? It's all relative, right? Or maybe not. I can feel Sri Yukteswar giving me that look. I think he's saying that he doesn't agree and that maybe I should make this discussion a little bit deeper. When Yogananda came to the West, he brought with him a host of teachings, tools, and techniques, but they all were for a single purpose, which he articulated in just 7 words: the time for knowing God has come. He also brought the what he called original Christianity, which is to say the uncrucified version. Yogananda was, in the truest sense, a revolutionary. His intent was to overturn the fallacies and myths that characterized many of the religious ideas and rules of engagement at that time. He was hugely popular wherever he went, but his followers were relatively few. it's axiomatic that when people are asked to make pivotal changes in their lives, few are those who are ready and willing to take the baton. For the student of history, it isn't hard to see why the revolution that Yogananda proposed had been, or has been, rather slow to unfold. The vestiges of old religious beliefs, even, when they are faulty and confusing, tend to petrify in the consciousness, particularly of those who have a stake in their continuance. For example, several hundred years ago, in a period known as the Dark Ages, the way to know God became very convoluted. Religion was steeped in dogma, and the concept of inner communion with the Lord gave way to outward expressions, practices, and rules that were, well, not of the holiest nature. In those days, the best way to worship was seemingly to walk a very strict religious line or face the Inquisition. We see these practices today, of course, and these rules as being contrived and backward. But it's not enough to say that they're passé, because that which has long been used to control the mindset of a whole population tends to have a lingering effect. Thankfully, we are now in a new age, a more enlightened age, in which even science and spirituality are coming more together and beginning to point to the errors and correct the errors of what used to be seen as the best way to worship. In the 1860s, when Babaji reintroduced Kriya Yoga to Lahiri Mahashaya, the world was becoming ripe for a new and higher experience of communion with God. Today's reading from Rays of the One Light is basic to Ananda's teaching. It's all about the inward journey, the importance of meditation, and the need to withdraw from outward pursuits that compete with our spiritual progress. We've been schooled in these matters since we first stepped onto the path. And even if you're brand new to these teachings, I'm sure you get it, that merely attending church or blandly going through the motions of any religious practice without the proper consciousness does not translate to being a spiritual person. As Garrison Keillor once put it, sitting in church on Sunday does not make you a Christian any more than sitting in your carport makes you a car. But the fact is that between hearing what we need to do and then doing it, there is often a period of years and even lifetimes that intervene. We have what are known as excuses. Things get in the way. Things that persuade us to put our spiritual practices on hold while we attend to other matters which we euphemistically refer to as our personal goals and priorities. The reason we have a reading like the one today, and the reason that we need to hear it again and again is because the message and the inspiration are soon overwhelmed by the pace of our worldly commitments. We have children to raise, elders to care for, we have bills to pay, errands to run, duties one after another, and of course, probably a wish list of many attractive things that we would like to acquire or maintain. Our lives are busy with trying to make ends meet. And meanwhile, the ends seem to get farther and farther apart. I wonder if there isn't a message in that. Now, you know as well as I that someday we're going to leave this life. And we're not going to need a U-Haul truck for the next leg of our journey. Our homes, families, careers, our talents and achievements, all of that and more stays behind. Allowing these things to define us is simply self-defeating. It locks us into ego consciousness, which locks us out of being in touch with our higher nature. What we need, I think, is to be more childlike, not childish, but more childlike in our approach to God. Children are not burdened with being rational or realistic or inhibited. They live in the moment. Jesus said, "Suffer little children to come unto me," because they come with less baggage. In their innocence, they can also be refreshingly delightful. There's a story about a little girl in Sunday school, and whether or not it's true, I love the story. The kids that day were being encouraged to draw pictures of someone or something that they loved, and of course there were a lot of stick figures of mommy and daddy and, favorite pets. But there was one little girl who appeared to be very carefully, involved in drawing something else. And when the teacher came around, she said, "Susie, that's really very nice. What is it?" And she said, "It's a picture of God." And the teacher said, "Well, Susie, no one knows what God looks like." And without missing a beat, Susie said, "They will in just a minute." More childlike. What we need is a new vision of ourselves, a vision of our oneness with all that is. Even science is coming around to the concept of an indivisible universe. The trouble is, we just don't see it that way, do we? Our senses tell us that I'm here, you're there, and between us, there is some distance that delineates our separation. You and I can argue, I'm sure, or we can agree, I'm sure, that we share the same experience of that separation. It even has a name. We call it reality. But the more we buy into that reality, the more confused and restless we get. Clearly, our conditioning is a huge part of the problem, because society as we know it is committed to separation. It would have us believe that the best way to worship is to worship what it promotes. In today's society, we are urged every day and in every form of media to seek our happiness outside of ourselves in things that come and go, in that commitment to separation. In fact, we're even urged to strive for more than we need. But that's a loser's game, because the more we acquire to keep becomes our keeper instead. It keeps us having to keep it up or find something else to replace it, whatever it may be. And thus we just go round and round, up and down, exhausting and stressing ourselves in search of society's holy grail, that promise of something or someone that is going to give us a permanent sense of completion and satisfaction, happiness. Needless to say, that is hardly the best way to worship, because it cannot deliver what we truly want: peace of mind, lasting joy, and a path to our soul's freedom. Is it difficult to break the habit of that conditioning? Oh, you bet it is. The material world is what we were raised in, and it does very little, if anything, to support the person who puts his needs ahead of those, in other words, his soul needs ahead of the desires of body and mind. Anyone who thinks that walking a spiritual path is easy is probably not walking one very carefully. But it doesn't take a wizard to break the spell. It just takes love. A lot of love. Love God. Love what is. Make better whatever you can, and trust that God will take care of the rest. Love when your road gets tough, and you will sooner find your way to a smoother road once again. Love even when your meditation is kind of a mess. Love that you made the effort and keep making the effort. We all have days when the battle is doing its best to beat us down, and then especially is when we need to take hold of the teachings that these masters have given us. They've given us to follow. What else are we here to do? As it said in our reading today, the hour cometh and now is when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Jesus was replying to a question by the woman of Samaria about where to worship as opposed to how. And he was making it clear that place is really of little importance comparatively. What matters is the depth of devotion that we bring to wherever we choose to commune with the Lord. Holy places like this temple are infused with vibrations that can greatly add to our experience of prayer and meditation. But a subway train in New York City can serve the purpose as well when the devotee's love is profound. After all, it was in a subway car that Master wrote his magnificent Samadhi poem. It also matters that we persist in our quest to commune with God. In holy places, we may feel wondrously uplifted, but when we leave and the outside world re-exerts its influence, many an uplifted feeling passes away. The holiest of holies is the sanctuary of the heart, connected to the spiritual eye. It's there in daily meditation and in God remembrance throughout each day that we want to keep lit the sacred lamp of our gratitude and inner communion. Loving and making the most of whatever comes your way is the best way to worship. Some of what we get is not what we want. But no matter how distasteful it may seem, it's there to help us free ourselves of the pain and hardship that it represents so that it doesn't just keep recycling. Calmly give yourself the best shot you can to acceptance and resolution of whatever comes your way. When you do, your best shot gets even better, and your level of joy increases. And besides, what else are we really here to do? I'd like to close with a poem from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda. This is number 152. Teach me not to be deceived by the senses. O divine teacher, train me to recognize the difference between my soul's lasting happiness and the passing pleasures of the senses. Keep my eyes open that I be not deceived by my senses, decked out as they are in stolen royal trappings and in the mirage cloak of false happiness. As thus disguised, they try to enter the mansion of my life. Discipline my unwise, wayward senses, that my pleasures be spiritualized, and that I look ever beyond the illusion of glittering forms to find divine joy, simply dressed in the white robe of humility. God bless you. Let's just take a moment of reflection.